Hello, everyone, and welcome to my little broadcast here on Google Hangouts, which I'm still trying to figure out. So I'm not really even sure if I'm 100% broadcasting. So Google, if you're listening, you should think about trying to make this a little bit more easy because it's a bit difficult to try to figure all this out. I have enabled questions. I'm not really sure if you guys can see it on the right side. And it says, but it doesn't really show anything. So I'm going to try to go ahead to my other browser and just confirm real quick that I'm online. And let's see, hopefully in the future we can make this a little easier. Let's see, sorry, bear with me 1 second. I'm trying to see. Okay, well, it does look like it's going. Everything looks, it's not sharing my screen. I'm going to try to go ahead and share my screen. Let's see here, share screen. Do that. Okay, so now we should be sharing the screen. Good. Okay, Clarence, welcome. I see Clarence has posted. I see your broadcast. Thank you very much. Okay, so now I think we are trying, as we're good on that. Just want to confirm everything. Okay, let me also let's see if it's, I'm going to go ahead and put the files up. I'm going to try to figure out how to put the files up here. Let me see here. This is sort of taking over my window. Bear with me just 1 second. It's telling me I can't put the files up. I'll give everyone a minute or so to get started here. And make sure I share this with everyone. Okay. Let's see, share. Okay. Okay, so also I'm going to try my the Twitter. I think so. I think we said it was going to be hashtag LiveCode Guru. And let's see, I'm gonna. Okay, so I've sent out the the drive where everything is. We're still going to have some code that we're going to do today, so you can download them now. Most of them you're going to need to have a server set up with revIgniter and things of this nature. So we can wait till after the class, or let's see. Let me just get my presentation. I had to move it. Okay, I think we're good to go. And here's my presentation. I guess it's making me do view only, so maybe that works out. Okay, so just confirming with everyone that we are good and we are broadcasting. Great, perfect. Okay, so so everyone should see the checks. Thanks, Ben. Also check there. Fabulous, thanks. Okay, so what we want to do today is really go over, and bear with me a little because I've never used this. I tried a little demo of this Google Hangout, but it's a bit shaky at first. Okay, what we want to do now is kind of really go over the idea of building a web service. I got a lot of emails and requests that said, look, I'm still not getting it, so I really need you to go over it again and go over it slow. Some of this will be a little bit of a rehash, but I really want to go over a clear message to everyone in a sense of how to build the LiveCode cloud server in 6 steps in 60 minutes. So now we have 50 minutes. Most of you have already we've gone over this. It's how to set up. But as a repeat, the first thing you're going to need to do is get a cloud server. You're going to need to get a type of control system like cPanel with the LiveCode, with your LiveCode account. For those that have the Indy license and above, you get a LiveCode server. It has cPanel installed. You can very easily get set up with this. So if you don't have a LiveCode, if you're not an Indy license, or if you have your community user, you'll have to go ahead and set up your own server on another system. There are several companies that actually will host LiveCode web services, the web servers. Okay, and the main thing that we spoke in the past about was the 2 things that you're really interested at first is your file manager and your FTP accounts. So that what you can do is you can set up your server by knowing your domain. You're going to have some type of, you're going to have a domain that will, in a sense, be a subdomain of whatever server you're in, and then what you can do is go to something like GoDaddy, and you can then put in your URL domain. You can come in here and you'll set that up all through cPanel. But for right now, today, we're just really focusing on how to get it set up very, very quickly. The first thing, oops, sorry, I think we went too far. Yeah, the first thing you need to do is just go into the cPanel, create a folder, and that's really how you set up a website. You just go in, you create a folder. It's just like you would do on a desktop, and you say, okay, we're going to go ahead and set up where we're going to be. In this case would be your domain name, which would have been or essentially your subdomain. In this case, with your LiveCode server, you'll have a number .on-rev.com, and then you would get, you want to go ahead and put your new folder name. So that's going to be your URL. Okay, and I'm going to periodically be going to see if there's any questions here, because it's not on the same form like the other one, so I have to go back and forth. You're going to need an FTP app. I recommend FileZilla. It's free, it's multi-platform, and it's pretty much available to everyone. The web server. Now, I wanted to also bring up, I'm a big fan of revIgniter. I want to say here, you don't have to have revIgniter to actually use LiveCode on the server. You can write your own scripts just directly using LiveCode. But if you're going to do any type of real serious cloud computing, I mean, everything including, all the things that you're looking at that you would need, like cookies and cache and sessions, security, you're going to need a framework. And even if you coded it in PHP or Node.js or any of those things, they all pretty much use or utilize frameworks. revIgniter is based on CodeIgniter, which was converted by Ralph. CodeIgniter is the #1 PHP framework on the internet right now, and it's probably the most popular of all. And so Ralph has been very kind, and it's an open source project that he's actually done all the work to bring all that functionality to the LiveCode community. It's free and open source, and he has a little donation money to buy me a beer, so I recommend everyone at least buy him a beer. You just go to revIgniter downloads, and you can download the functionality. And I wanted to bring this up because I know it's a really big issue now that LiveCode is moving on to HTML5, and everyone's all excited. They're seeing that they can create functionality with HTML5. The excitement is really, really brewing. But I want you to ask yourself a question. This is what from his website even, I guess he quoted me, which was interesting. And it's what I see on the boards now. Now that we have this HTML5, this is really, really great. But what are we going to do with it? How do I connect to a database? How do I can do a calculator that's really neat, but people aren't going to be paying you to create calculators online. They're going to be paying you to create like a loan calculator for a bank. And that data then needs to, and what they're really going to do is they want it for lead generation, or then they want to turn around and ask the user to put their name and email in so that they can contact them for a loan. Some type of functionality like that. Or if they want to, if you're going to do a calculator, then you want that whatever the user has calculated to go back to a server and save it somewhere. You need a web server for that. And that's pretty much the answer to that. HTML5 is unbelievably fantastic, but inevitably, you need a web server. Anything that goes on the internet is a two-step process, which is the view, which the user sees, and the backend, which we're going to get in today. In this case would be revIgniter and the app you wrote. The documentation is really fantastic. I recommend you take a look at it. I've spoken on this in the past, but really just go and there's a lot here. First, it's going to seem enormously daunting, and what we're going to try to do is this is a baby step, the first step of getting you into this, and then as the weeks and months go by, hopefully we'll get everyone becoming much more familiar. We're going to deal with a whole myriad of issues after this. Okay. The first thing you're going to want to do is get an editor. So last time TextMate, and Ralph has a TextMate editor that's primarily for the Mac. So everyone asked me to do some research, and I found Atom. Atom is a very similar browser. Not browser, I'm sorry. It's a very similar text editor. It's open source. They have 2 bundles already. I believe Peter from LiveCode team has actually created language files for them, so that he has both in LiveCode and also revIgniter. So and then here are the 2 language bundles that you then just add into the thing, into Atom. You can use the TextMate bundle that Ralph did, but they're already built with, or they did, or whatever. So it's available. This thing keeps on moving. It really throws me up. So all those things are available. You want to use a text editor. I highly recommend that you don't edit your files with the cPanel text editor, because number 1, you're going to create bugs, and 2, you're going to when you break your file and then you hit save, all of a sudden your website will stop. There's I can strongly recommend that number 1, you test everything local. 2, you put everything to a staging server. which could just be another folder under your server. Doesn't have, you don't actually need what they call a staging server, but it's not a full new server. It really is just like another folder. And then when everything is tested and good, then you move it over to live. So that's I strongly recommend that. And after years and years of making mistakes and actually doing what I'm telling you not to do, I say this for reasons, because I've taken down several websites by just trying to cut a shortcut. Because once you put it up there, once you edit online, it's not going to tell you whether your JSON's correct, with your arrays correct, or anything like that. And in a script like this, a text script, it's gone. It's gone. It runs nothing. So your whole site will go down. Okay. This is just if you wanted to go and you wanted to do it for the TextMate. This is how to do the TextMate, and there's instructions how to do it for the Atom. So this is the instructions on how to do it TextMate if you wanted to do that. So let's talk about the LiveCode and revIgniter. Primarily, revIgniter. And I'm just going to go through this really, really quick, is the broken down into somewhat of a complex file system like that keeps on moving on me. This has, you have your root, your revIgniter system, you have your systems file, you have another folder for applications, then you have another folder for config, and then you finally have your config.livecode. The main thing that you need to set up directly is going to be your base URL, and that's really, really important. The default is example.com, and clearly that's not going to work for you. What you essentially need to do is put in your URL, and in this case, the URL would be, if I go back real quick, let's hope go too far back, or where did I go there? Your base URL would essentially be this plus the folder that you create. So your base URL would be your subdomain, beyondrev.com/your folder. So that's pretty much going to be your base URL. And then you need to tell revIgniter that. I'll update those files to include that, explain that a little bit more. I'll add a slide in there to maybe explain that. I think that would be helpful. The main thing the point number 2, is to understand control model view. And wait, let me make sure, see if there's any questions. Okay, we have a question by Clarence. Is this being recorded via YouTube? Yes, the answer to that is yes. That's one of the reasons why I went to the with the Google Hangouts, because I created essentially a Google user, the LiveCode Guru. So in a sense, it would, not only does it record it, but it's available immediately after. And number 2, it also gives me a Google Drive, so that I know there was a lot of there was some issues about things getting updated, it taking days and things of this nature. Well, my goal is to have everything prior to the now that I've sort of figured out this whole Google system, is actually have all of the files available prior to the class, so that, or the lecture, I should say, so that, or the webinar, that you guys can play with it a little bit ahead of time. And also that by the time we get here, you guys would have some better questions. And also it would be freely available to everyone and available immediately. So yes, and that answer is yes. And you just essentially come back to the same URL, and it will, it should have it live and be able to replay it exactly at that moment. Okay, so control model view. Really interesting, because I've been a big fan of this architecture for an enormously long time. I've been in the racket a long, long time. I mean, I even remember, playing around with Smalltalk and things of this, one of the original ones that used this type of concept. What the system primarily does is it forces you to break your app into 3 parts. Now, the really thing that's sort of interesting and also funny at the same time is that LiveCode has now introduced a business model or business option as one of their product options. And the core, one of the key pluses to that is a control model view architecture that they have constructed. And you know, it's a fabulous way to do it. It's a complete smart way to do development, and you will see that today. The primary reason for that is it allows you to keep everything organized and really, really separate. And it's like, for example, today, a lot of the questions that were raised in the sense of people saying, I didn't understand it, or I was really struggling to understand this whole development was, I could tell by the questions they were asking that I didn't really do a very good job of separating the control model view and really explaining how each piece is independent. So that's what we're going to really hopefully focus on today. Okay, in revIgniter, the control model view are within 3 folders. And you'll see there's a lot of other stuff in here, and we're going to, you know, revIgniter is an entirely framework infrastructure as complex, probably if not even more complex than even LiveCode itself, because you know, once you get on the web, you have an enormous amount of other issues that you have to deal with that you don't have to deal with in your own app. And so the framework and the system itself it can be quite daunting. So for right now, we're just going to focus on the first 3. And if we take this step by step, one pebble at a time, you know, we'll cross the river. And I think by the time everything gets finished, I think, you know, it'll give you time to learn a lot of web technologies, web concepts, and various things of this nature. Okay, so we have a question from Pradeep. Is there a different pricing model for the business model? Answer to that question is yes. It is a pricing model, but you get my understanding is there are so much more things involved. They include like a source safe, you know, a way to to modularize LiveCode scripting so that it's easier to work as teams. So they have a team project. They also have one-to-one, or they have like direct support with developers. It's a whole series of extra things. And if memory serves me correct, I think it's $100 a month, but you need to double check on that, or somewhere about there. But if you're a serious commercial developer, I mean, $100 a month is like Zippo in my book. But the nice thing is they have a real nice progression. You can start LiveCode with the open source module. It's free. You can play around with it, make sure you feel comfortable with it. Then you can come with the indie developer. I think now is $49. You know, you get a website with it and things of this nature. And then when you get commercial and you're going to need that help and you're making some money, you can migrate up to the business. So I think they've done, you know, I'm independent in a sense, but I will tell you, I think they did a really nice job and a, you know, somewhat reasonable price that I consider. Because if you're going to really do commercial development, I mean, the price for that is not much. So I hope that answers your question. Okay, so today let's understand control model view. Now, way I'm bringing, what we're going to do today is we're going to focus on creating the App Store. And the App Store is broken up into 3 sections. Okay, you have the slider up top, you have the apps down below, and then you have the categories. And the reason I bring this up is, and you'll see I sort of wrote these into the slides, you know, I've been doing software development now for over 25 years, and there's always this big question: what comes first, the chicken or the egg? And I'm here to tell you, after 25 years, I've made a decision. It's the chicken. I mean, I'm sorry, it's definitely the chicken. You know, everyone wants to start with database models and all this other stuff, so they're like, no, it's the egg. But I'm telling you, if you're going to do an app, and especially in a language like LiveCode, it's the chicken. And on the web, you need to design what your UI is all about. You've got to get that view done before you start writing all of your logic and your data. I'm sure there's a lot of people that would disagree with me, but this is what this is my personal opinion. So that's what I'm going with. the reason I do this, and now I'm going to explain to you in a control model view, not only for LiveCode and revIgniter, but also just a general programming way to do things, is that in a sense, it gives you what your customers are going to see. You as a programmer, when I'm looking at this, it allows me to start to think about the data objects that I would need. Okay. Eventually, now that we had LiveCode 8 coming out, I would either use a control, I would create my own control. Like they have a slider object here. What I would do is I would create a slider object, probably in LiveCode 8, that would allow me to do this functionality so that I could reuse it. If I were doing it for a website, I would do it in jQuery. I would get a jQuery slider that has similar to functionality. That's what I'm giving you today, a slider of that. And then when I do that, once I have those pieces and I get what I need, then I can turn around and focus on which is most important, then the model and then the controller. Okay, so in my mind, it goes view, model, controller. Okay, so let's take a look at something really, really simple. So we're going to go to create a real simple system here to how to do that. So if I take my same metaphor here, my 3 sections, and I break it up into a LiveCode file, okay, or HTML, I want to basically do my view. What I'm really going to do is I want to have 3 things. I want my HTML, I want my slider 1, my slider 2, my product 2, and my categories. So what I've basically done is taken my 1, 2, 3, and I have a view. It's simple. All it really does is produce the text of that, and then boom. Okay, so now I've got my structure. I've really broken my thing down into 3 sections. All it really does is just give me the text, but at least it gives me a start of where I'm going to go with this. Okay, now I want to start getting, and I want to say, okay, how am I going to do that in LiveCode? So what I've done is, what you would do is you would create an index.lc, which is in many ways it's the default, what you would do like an index.html. For those unaware, the Apache and all web systems will always look for an index.html. By same token, it will also always look for an index.lc through LiveCode, because that's the default. That's just tradition has gone on that way. Okay, let me see if there's any questions. Okay, Jean-Marc says, is there no body? Yes, of course you would do a body. I'm just trying to keep it simple here for simplicity's sake. But yeah, you would want to do a body, and you would, which we're going to get to in a second. We're going to do a real full HTML. Okay. Now, what we're really doing here is, if you read this, what it essentially is doing is saying calling the view, the controller is calling the view, and then it calls that view, in this case the index, and the controller doesn't do anything but just return, I'm sorry. This thing is jumping around a lot. Yeah, okay. So it returns this. So this returns the slider, the products, the categories. So in a sense, it would be like, you know, your URL, the folder where your root is, your, you know, the index.lc, the index controller, and then the command that you're going to call. Now, I bring this up in that normally, and this gets a little bit out of today's lesson, you can clean up these URLs using HTTP access files and a whole bunch of other stuff. There's all kinds of different really neat tricks that you can get into. We're not really going to cover them today, because, you know, just how to control your server, getting your server set up to the point where, you know, a full website will function with a whole variety of different names, whether you actually want to have the HTML extension on it or not. All of that we're going to have to cover another day, because that's a whole nother hour plus within itself. But for now, just saying, look, we get this elongated URL, because just like all things in the computer, even if you look for the name of your stack, you'll see it's this enormously long thing, and that's how they get that uniqueness out of it. The same thing that goes here. Now, what we want to try to do is we want to get into a model. Okay, so we're going to create, and all these are there, we're going to create a really simple model now. And that the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to say, hey, I need to get the data. Now, normally in LiveCode, and this is the difference, like if I were doing a LiveCode app, I would create a stack, I'd create a card, I would put on an image, and I would drop a button on it, and I would say, okay, set the first image there to the slider data. Well, you know, that's not necessarily a really, really good way. I'm going to rephrase that. That is a bad way to develop. Now, the problem is LiveCode makes it so easy for you to do that, it almost, it's tempting. You will pay for it in the end. Trust me, the end you will pay for it, because by not having good structure, not organizing your app well, once it gets more complex and once you expand on it, then you're going to really be happy and grateful that you broke everything up into 3 pieces. So in this case, you're creating a model, you're creating not only do you create one particular model, let's say a model would be like the slider. Now, in this case, we're just getting slider data, but what you can actually do is get something that's a little bit more complex. You can actually have multiple functions within the slider model. It doesn't have to be the one-to-one. So the idea is you're grouping your slider, you're grouping your anything. You don't have to, but in this, I recommend that, like, for example, everything to do with the slider is a model. And then you could have your 3 or 4 functions that you need to get that data from the slider. That's how I would recommend it. You don't kind of structure any way that you want to do it, but I recommend you sort of do it by functionality. And then, so what we're going to do here is we're just going to go ahead and return an array. And what I want to do is I want to point out and make a really important point here is that, again, when we really had the question, what came first, the chicken or the egg? And I picked the chicken, and this is a perfect example of how that runs. Once you create a control model view, you set up your model, and you write your functions that says get slider data, okay? And by doing that, what it allows you to do is simulate what you would do with the database. And that's a really important concept. It's really, really important that I wanted to bring that up. And that's the gist of what I think a lot of people were trying to get a website up and running, try to get a web service or a web app running or a cloud service for their app. And they're like, I don't know where to start, I don't do anything. And I'm explaining to you, the best way to do it is design your app first, and then turn around and create the database structure using arrays, and then you create your control to send it off. I'm saying it again and again because it's really important. That's pretty much the gist of why people were really having a lot of issues and why they were sending me emails. So I'm saying to you is, look, just go in, simulate whatever you would in your model, and then once you've tested everything is good and then everything works, then essentially what you'll do is you will pull it out, and you will then be able to go back, put it in a database, structure your database, and then move that array data, your sample ones, into a similar structure in the database. Okay? So back to our home. Now we're moving back to the controller. Essentially what I'm doing now is, instead of just saying, hey, go ahead and load this, what you're actually doing is you're saying get the slider data. It will pull the data from the slider. It automatically comes back as an array. And then what you're saying is, now we're starting to create a fuller model, which is going to be which eventually is going to be our home page. And then it's important to note here, as you're going through this, that revIgniter has global array handlers, and a way to these global variables are really how revIgniter sort of manages all the process. So number one thing that we want to do is, you'll see in the file it has a global control handler. What that really tells LiveCode is what to make public. Okay, there is a private and a public function in LiveCode. Most people don't really use it, but in the web, you're really, really, really going to want to use it. You don't want to. You only want to public or expose the app to the minimum amount of functions that are necessary to let your user do something. Other than that, keep it private. Your web server is really just going to be a black box, either to get a web page or to get some JSON data. And you can control that but at the top of your controller, you can set, oh, why does this keep on moving? You can set the G controller handles, and that will just, you set what comes public. Now in here, what we're doing is we set the slider, and then we go to the view. Then within the view, now we essentially start to change our HTML, or what's going to be basically our LiveCode view. Now what you can do is you put these handlers in the LiveCode script that tells anything between the question marks is a script, and that script is then run. Okay, so it's really important that what you can do is you don't want to write your app per se in the view, but for sure you're going to need some type of if-then statements. You're going to need some conditional, whether it's looping. If you get a full array back, then what you're going to want to do is loop through all of the items in the array. You definitely need to code, but you want to keep that code to a minimum. And one of the first ways that you keep that code to a minimum is to build your data structure in a way or a manner that essentially it allows you to access that data and pull that data out in a very clear, concise way. So by knowing what your view is, or knowing what the results are going to be, it's so much easier to go back in and say, okay, look, I've got a slider, so I know within the slider I need to know, I need to know the image URL, maybe a link to whatever, an ID that, or some type of ID or URL on the web page that's going to know where to go for the when the user clicks on it. And then you put all of that data in here. And in here, I just put a little simple thing to show you how to just put in some basic LiveCode script. And just in order to get the 1, you can just put 1 + 0 and then dot slider so that you get the same one, just to show that. Okay. Then of course the result is we now have a web page. That's why it keeps on doing that. My mouse gets crazy. So in a sense, by putting in that image, now I go ahead and I get it just throws in the image, just so that those people are not familiar. This is the HTML tag for images. Now, if you remember, what we configured that base URL, if everybody remembers, that base URL essentially is going to give us the core URL that we're dealing with. It will give it to our website's root. And when we configure that when we first started, you use it again here, so that if you wanted to put the full URL in there, you can go ahead and do that. And that's how you reference that. So these global arrays, they're reading from these global arrays. And so that's this G data, which we set in the controller, and the G config, which was already set up in the config file. Okay, and those are the results. Now, let's talk about, again, we're going to go ahead and do our views. Now, what we're really doing, and this is what we're doing in the Create It with LiveCode class, is the final lesson, in which we're still finishing, is how do we create a controller or a web server, a cloud server, that communicates both with a website and my app, and probably eventually an HTML5 app. Okay. Again, I really want to emphasize to you, and included in the code, the upload that I sent in there is an app. We just mocked it up, the store app. Okay. The last question, a lot of people, I got a lot of emails, even though I spoke about it in the past. How am I going to do HTML? I got a lot of one that says, look, I'm not a web guy. The reason I love LiveCode is that it's so simple. I can't wait till HTML5 comes out. But I'm here to tell you, inevitably, you're still going to have to do something in HTML. Because HTML5 is not going to give you the SEO that you want. Okay, LiveCode 5 is an app. It's a web app. It's not a web page. Okay, you're going to run into the problems that everyone ran into when they did Flash. Everyone came up with Flash websites, and then of course, nothing was showing up in Google, and everyone's like, well, how come I'm not on Google? Well, Google can't read your Flash, because it's just an image. And the same thing with HTML5. It's just really essentially, it's in a canvas, actually, the technical, it's in the HTML5 canvas. So really, it's just a picture. But you still need a page. And how do you get that? You buy it. It's that simple. Buy it, buy it, buy it. Unless you are a really great designer. And let me tell you what, all the great HTML designers that I know, they buy it too. Just buy it. Find a great one. There's tons of open ones. There's tons of free ones. They're beautiful. They're like 15, 16 bucks. Trust me, there is no way you're going to be able to create the complexity of these things in 15 bucks unless you pay yourself 50 cents an hour. So go ahead and buy it. Okay, in this case, I have supplied to you, I call it the template, a web example of what was created. Actually, we bought it, so there you go, of what a store would be, or what we're looking for this store. And if you look at the web page, we essentially have the same three groups. We have the slider, the products, and the categories. Okay? So the data, essentially, if you're starting to see the pattern here, the data is the same, whether it's the app or the website. You start to really see it's 1, 2, and 3. See? 1, here's the app that you get. So it's 1, here is the slider. 2 is the apps. And 3 would be the categories and their search. Okay. So again, let's bring up the data model. So how would we do this? So I'm getting this, all of a sudden in my mind, I'm starting to think about how am I going to structure the data, all this type of way. But if you're going to have it on a web server, and we've talked about this in the thing, you're probably going to do it in MySQL. So you're going to have a whole data structure in MySQL. If you're doing it, your app, you're going to store that data in an SQLite file. So the databases between the server and the local storage are not going to be the same. They're not, and so you're going to need that middleware to bridge that between the two. And that middleware is basically an array. It's going to, the way you communicate between the two is going to be a JSON. But inevitably, JSON is really a textual representation of the array. And then once you send it down to your local app, you're just going to convert that JSON into an array, back into a LiveCode array, and you're going to take that array and then you're going to store it in your local database. I will say that next lesson we're going to go over the whole database. Today the main thing is just to really understand the 6 steps that it's going to take to create this structure. So we're really just doing the array models today, and then the next lesson will be a real in-depth, a whole hour just on databases and how to structure your data for this web HTML5 and an app structure, and also for desktops. I don't want to skip off desktops. Over the last year or so, a lot of people have asked me, what about desktops? And I'll tell you that it's still highly, highly used. I mean, the media doesn't really cover them because it doesn't seem sexy. But if you really look at it, look at the Apple App Store and the Windows Store and things like that. They're still doing billions and billions of dollars every month in sales. So don't discount that. A lot of people still like to run apps on their desktop. So don't skip that market. And especially since the file format is very similar to iPad. I mean, you design an iPad in 1024 by 768, which is pretty much the same size as a desktop. So it's not like it's a real stretch between an iPad and a desktop. A lot of people, rightly, wrongly, are really, in a sense, designing for the iPad and sort of bringing it to the desktop with a, quote, iPad-esque way of doing it with just a little bit of the mouse clicks. Some people will tell you that's absolutely wrong way to do it, but it's probably makes good business sense. And so that's what I highly recommend. If you're thinking about doing structure like that, see how you're structuring the iPad for, and then bring it down to the desktop. And we're actually we're doing that with the calendar app in the Create class. Okay, so the last thing, one of the things I want to put here is the model. In the sense, when in the model, what you want to be able to do is security is a key issue. And the important thing is in each of your model files, you can put this in. And what this essentially does is it takes that base path and it says, look, this model cannot be called from outside unless I'm being called from this, your base path. Your base path is essentially automatically set when you drop the files on. So revIgniter takes care of that for you. So you'll not be able to call the model from outside. The only way to call it is internally from a control, and that gives you that control. Otherwise, you're going to end up like Target and have all of your encryption and your all that sort of information get swiped. And everyone always says, I'm like a nothing person. Why would they come after me? I say it over and over again. I've been hacked myself so many times, or tried to be. Don't ask me why. I guess not enough people with enough things to do in their life. Okay, so let's go to the model for the slider. So now we're really getting into the whole concept of what the real structure can be. So you have the files, you can look at them, you can download them, and you can see them all. So in a sense, there's 5 slides. What I'm really looking to do is put in the 3 things that we're going to need for the slider, which is your ID, your main slider, and your thumbnail. Okay. Now in your product model, we really and essentially we're going to create a function that's called get apps by group. So we have this model for my products. So maybe I could have called it app model, whatever you want to call it. So in a sense so my products of what I'm selling are apps. Now, if you look at the view, again, this helped me when you design the database. By looking at the view, especially for my home page, it breaks it up. It breaks those lists up by categories. Okay. And so we want to structure the model the same way. And we're going to create a function like that, which is get apps by group, and then you pass it the group that you want. Normally you would query the database. So we're really structuring this like we would structure a database call, but we are, in a sense, we are simulating that by putting in the arrays. So that, again, if everything goes good, we get the data that we want, then what you're going to do is you can then turn around, put all this data in a database, and then query it and build it dynamically based on what's on the database. Same with the categories. It just essentially you're calling a function in the category model, and it returns to you the category name and the category ID. Which then, like with this category, if it's an app, you would then know, like you would make another call. If it's in your view, what you would do is probably put a URL in there that would then call another function to load up the category page. So now we're really beginning to load it all together. We're at to point number 5, which is coding the controller and the web view. And as you'll see, oh, we got a question. Let's see here from PDEP. How does the data flow to the app directly from the data server to JSON array, or the data server to local SQLite and then JSON array in the app? So that's a really great question. And what we're going to do is we're going to get to that right after this point, because that's essentially what that's a really great question, because that's the root of what this is about today, because people were really struggling with that. So that is a fabulous question. So right now, essentially what I'm saying is this is how we want to build. We are building an array. So the way to call each module in the models in revIgniter is you have to load them. So this helps, this helps the revIgniter limit what they have to load. So it also, so that way instead of loading all the modules, the models every time, here you have to say load it, load it, load it. So it knows, it pulls that script into memory, it reads it, you know, interprets it, and gets it ready. So by calling these, that's very, very helpful. Then, oops, sorry. I gotta work on this with my mouse. Sorry about that. All right, I think I passed it. Okay, by this, what we're doing, so you load the 3 modules, then you're loading the model. The slider, it loads that into an array. Then it loads the products. We get the featured category. We're loading up 2 categories, the games category, and then the actual category list on the right. So what we've really done is we've created our model that matches what our view is going to look like, which is 3 groups, the slider, the products, and the category. And we've loaded them into arrays. Even within categories, there's 2 other subarrays, games and featured list. That's what we're doing now. And you know, that sort of gives us a great array. But what are you going to do with the array, right? You know, arrays is just an array. And so what we do is we created a function in the command in the controller called home app store HTML. Now the really interesting thing here is if you look at this function that says build app home array, if you look at it in the code, you'll see that it's not public, and this was really important. So this function is actually called by another controller function that's then public. Okay, so this helps me stay organized. You're going to get it in just a second, because what this does, it builds my array. Then once I get that array, as I do here, I put it right into my GData. Actually, that's wrong on the slide. I apologize. That it really should say a home page there instead of slider. I'll have to fix that. Sorry about that. So it reads the. I'll update the files and everything. So it reads the home data array. Okay, and it puts it into the GData, and then I call my home again. And what that's going to do is that's going to load that home page with all of that data in it. Okay. Now, to your question, which was great. So this home app store loads my array and then sends it to my view. And the user is going to get back HTML, right? But when I want to load my data for my app, how does that work? Because then it's going to send me back HTML. So I have a different function, okay? In a sense, this is what most people refer to as a REST API. I have a different function called get home data. Now, what does get home data do, and what's the difference? So what's the difference between my web view and my app view? Very, very small, I'm happy to say. The neat thing is here is our data format is JSON. So what you're going to do is you're going to load up the easy JSON, okay? You're going to call the same build app home array, gives you back the array, and then what you're going to do is you're going to take that array and you're going to convert it to JSON, and you're just going to return JSON. So the app gets the array, and in a sense, it encodes the array into JSON, and it sends it on its way, and then you get it back. So if you're calling from the app, you call get home data, and it gives you back the JSON. If you're calling from, if you call the web page, you know, you just on the web page, you know, home app store HTML, you would then actually get, because it takes the data array and passes it to the view, and then this get will then replies back with the HTML. So then if you call this function, you would get the HTML back, and if you call this, you would actually get the JSON. But we structured it in such a way so that if you see the structure now, it's really helpful. First, we got an idea of what our views were supposed to be. We structured our data model to match those views. Then we came back to the controller and wrote one great function, build app home array, that builds from the different model functions, the different models that we've set up, puts it in one really, really nice structured array that you're going to need, right? And then either passes it to a view, and that view interprets it and puts it in HTML, or you send back the raw data in JSON. It's that simple. That is the core thing that a lot of people have been getting confused on, and hopefully today I've been able to show you how to do it in LiveCode in a nice, simple way. I will, for those that are interested, there are two libraries for JSON, EasyJSON and libJSON. I personally found EasyJSON a little bit less buggy. I had libJSON, which was nice. You know, kudos to both of them. They're both open sources. But we started to run into some bugs with this libJSON. It was returning an invalid JSON when they were completely valid. So you know, I basically stopped doing it. Both of them are easy to use. They're both one call, which is array to JSON. I know there is an external one that you can use. Monty has it in his merge ext that you can use in your app. I mean, we start with the EasyJSON, but when you really want to get great performances, you want to go ahead and get Monty's tool because what it does is it's a C wrapper for a JSON, and what he essentially your performance is going to be so much larger, especially on larger files. The larger files, you know, if you're getting JSON back and you know it's 1,000 or 1,500 lines, you know, LiveCode's really, really great with text, but still, I mean, to read 1,500, a couple thousand lines, you know, it's better to go native, especially on an app if you've got some speed issues. Okay, there's another question. How does the data? Oh, I'm sorry, I answered that one. So hopefully, Priyadeep, that answered your question. So the data is essentially, you want to create your model, then create a controller inside the controller function that pulls all of those together, creates one solid model, and then either you pass it on to the view or you finish it with, you convert it to JSON. And that's how to do it in 6 steps in 60 minutes. So hopefully that really helps people out and gets things organized. I'm going to go ahead and update the files this afternoon. I put some of them up there, but I'm also going to I'm going to write the code for the app to actually pull back the app. I'm going to leave the data and this server up there in case some of you guys don't have servers. So I'm going to go ahead and make the server public. And I'm going to go ahead in this documentation, go ahead and put the server URL. I went ahead and created a server for everyone so that you don't have access to it, but at least if you want to test it in the app and get the JSON back to sort of test it and to see how things going so that you can test it on your app, you know, feel free. So I'm going to go ahead and make all that public. We'll take care of that. We have, I guess, a minute left. My understanding is that they cut you off because I've set it up for an hour. So I don't know, they give me, I guess, a little bit over, but they sort of cut off. Let's see. The slides are available via Google Drive. Yes, Clarence, they are all available, plus all of the code, the images that's necessary to build the app are already online. I have tweeted it, and I will put it in the forum, the LiveCode forums, and I will also add it to the YouTube page so that anybody that goes to the YouTube page will actually find the corresponding files that they have ready access to. You can just download it. Okay. Is there are there any other questions? Okay. Let's see. So so again, class. So I'm going to go ahead and post the URL to the. I'll paste the URL on the YouTube page. Okay, so you'll get access to the slides and you'll get access to all of the files and everything. I will be updating the files this afternoon. So again, you should have that. So some people saying they're not on Twitter, which is fine. So you'll get them on the forums and you'll get them on the YouTube page. Okay. Hopefully this really answered a lot of questions for everyone, and this has been helpful sort of explaining the concepts of how to create a web cloud in 6 steps in 60 minutes using LiveCode and revIgniter. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone. And so the next class that we're going to do is really going to focus on data. In a sense, how do you convert your model from your array to a database, query an SQLite database, a MySQL database, send it down, and how are you going to data sync between your app and your HTML, which eventually also be your HTML5. And also, by the way, I might add one other thing. If you use on a web server, if you use something like Ajax, or if you're going to do, the Angular JS, you would then really you wouldn't return HTML. What you would do is you would return JSON. So even within a web page, or as you start to get more familiar with web pages and web development environments, you'll find that they also use JSON a lot. So this type of LiveCode is very, very, very well suited to handle those type of environments and those type of things. So, okay, everyone, have a great afternoon, and I will get the files up there, and I will then be announcing the next one. I believe I'm going to be in Dubai, but I'll be happy to. I'll have everything ready, and we'll go over the database structure. Okay. Let's see. Thanks, and have a great day. I'm also always available by email. Most of you guys have my email already. So go ahead and email me if you have any questions. Okay, so.